Airel is learning English. There are only two choices. I had to learn to speak the alien's language, or the alien had to learn to speak English. In fact, only one choice was possible. I would convince Airel to learn English, and I would learn it under the guidance of the language expert. The language specialist suggested that I take children's books, for basic reading, and grammar with me to the interview room. The plan was for me to sit next to the alien and read aloud to her from the books while pointing to the text I was reading with my finger. The theory was that the alien could eventually be taught to read, just as children learned to read, a word and a sound in association with a written word. They also assumed that if the alien was intelligent enough to communicate with me telepathically, and fly a spaceship across the galaxy, you could probably learn to speak the English language as fast as a 5-year-old, or faster. I went back to the interview room and pitched this idea to Airel. She did not object to learning the language, although she did not commit to it. No one else had a better idea, so we moved on. I started the reading lessons with the first pages of a book called McGuffey's Eclectic Reader, for grades 1 to 6. Since I am a nurse, not a teacher, the language specialist who gave me the books also gave me an extensive briefing. A full-day course on how to do it. He chose these specific books because the original version from 1836 taught reading for 100 years to about 4/5 of all American school children. McGuffey's educational course begins with the introduction of the alphabet, a house that must be memorized. And then step by step, use the building blocks of language to create and pronounce words, using the phonetic method that teaches children to connect sounds with letters. I also found that the vocabulary used in the book was very advanced compared to the relatively limited number of words that people commonly use in our modern age. As instructed, I sat next to Airel in the interview room and read aloud to her from every book in the McGuffey series. Each of the books had excellent and simple illustrations of the stories and topics being taught. Airel seemed to understand and absorb every letter, sound, syllable, and meaning. This process is for 14 hours a day for 3 consecutive days without interruption, except for a few meals and rest breaks on my part. Airel didn't take breaks for anything. She doesn't sleep. She remained sitting in the overcrowded chair in the interview room, reviewing the lessons we had already received. When I returned each morning to pick up where we left off, she memorized the previous lessons and progressed to the next pages. Although Airel had no mouth to speak to, she could now communicate with me in English. At the end of these lessons, Airel was able to read and study on her own. I showed her how to use the dictionary to look up new words she came across. Airel consulted the dictionary constantly. After that, my role was basically just a messenger for her. She requested that reference books be brought to her and they arrived in a steady stream. After that, she asked for many more picture books and reference books with photographs and drawings. Because no more than a few more days passed until she read several hundred of them. She studied every subject I could imagine, and many more. Very technical things that I never wanted to know, such as astronomy, metallurgy, engineering, mathematics, various technical manuals, and so on. Later she started reading fiction books, novels, poetry, and classics of literature. Airel also wanted to read a lot of books on subjects in the humanities, especially history. I think she must have read at least 50 books on human history and archaeology. Of course, I made sure she got a copy of the Bible as well, which she read without comment. Strangely, Airel told me that her favorite books were Alice in Wonderland, Don Quixote de la Mancha, and 1001 Nights. She said that the authors of these stories showed that spirit and imagination were more important than skill or strength. The understanding and subtlety of her questions showed that she has a very penetrating mind, and personally, I think she already knew a lot more about the culture and history of the planet than she was willing to admit when we started. On the 15th day after we rescued Airel from the crash site, I was able to communicate fluently and effortlessly in English. She had absorbed so much written material that her education far exceeded mine. She had very intensive study habits and an almost photographic memory. She was able to recall long passages from books she liked to read. She especially liked parts of the stories such as The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Gulliver's Travels, Peter Pan, and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. On the afternoon of the 16th, Airel and I sat next to each other. She closed the last page of the book she was reading and put it aside. I handed her the next book from a large stack waiting to be read when she turned and said, "I'm ready to talk now." At first, I was a little confused, but I signaled her to continue and she started teaching me the first lesson.